I'm going to introduce our panelists while the credits roll. Our moderator tonight, Dr. Rick Halperin, has a record of involvement in human rights issues that is 40 years long. He is chair of the Embry Human Rights Program at SMU, and he has served as chair of the board of directors of Amnesty International USA 3 times, most recently from 2005 to 2007. Dr. Halperin takes his role as an educator extremely seriously. 3 times a year, he takes students and members of the community on trips abroad to learn firsthand about human rights atrocities. Destinations include Argentina, Bosnia, Cambodia, El Salvador, Rwanda, and South Africa, not to mention the death camps in Poland, where he takes the group every year in December. Dr. Halperin also has worked with the United Nations to inspect prisons and monitor refugee camps. He has received so many awards, I could spend the rest of the night listing them. I'll mention just 2. The Amnesty International Frederick Douglass Abolitionist Award and the Dallas Peacemaker of the Year Award. Our panelist at the end there, Dr. Hind Jarrah, was born to Palestinian parents in Beirut, Lebanon. She earned a BS in pharmacy from the American University in Beirut. She went on to earn a PhD in pharmacology and a master's degree in neurosciences from the University of Texas in Dallas. In the wake of the 9/11 tragedy, Dr. Jarrah helped create a forum for interfaith dialogue at the Perkins School of Theology at SMU, and she has remained involved in interfaith dialogue ever since. In 2005, Dr. Jarrah co-founded the Texas Muslim Women's Foundation to be, as she says, a voice for voiceless Muslim women. She is now its executive director. The foundation quickly took on the problem of domestic violence, for as Dr. Jarrah explains, Muslim women were afraid to seek help after 9/11. The foundation educated local imams about the dynamics of domestic violence and persuaded them to sign a zero tolerance in my mosque agreement. Texas Muslim Women's Foundation also created community service programs in which youth and adult volunteers serve at Ronald McDonald House, Scottish Rite Hospital, the Family Place, Mosaic Family Services, and Refugee Services. Most recently, the foundation purchased a property to serve as a shelter for battered Muslim women, a shelter that will be sensitive to their language, religion, and attire. They are now working to raise money to operate the shelter. Our second panelist, Reggie Littlejohn in the coral jacket, graduated from Yale Law School and began a career in corporate litigation. On the side, she began pro bono work representing Chinese refugees seeking political asylum in the United States. One of these clients, a woman, had been forcibly sterilized in China. The shocking violence of this act led Ms. Littlejohn to an interest in women's human rights in China. Ms. Littlejohn went on to found Women's Rights Without Frontiers, and she is now its president. The nonprofit saves Chinese baby girls one at a time by offering monthly stipends to mothers who are at risk of aborting or abandoning their girls. Women's Rights Without Frontiers also assists mothers who are hiding or running to escape forced abortion, something that Ms. Littlejohn describes as, quote, one of the most violent things you could ever do to a woman, Lastly, Ms. Littlejohn has taken up the problem of sexual slavery in China. As the movie pointed out, sexual slavery and sex trafficking are closely linked to gendercide because they thrive in places where men greatly outnumber women. Ms. Littlejohn is an international expert on China's one-child policy. She has testified before Congress and the European Parliament, briefed the White House and the State Department, and spoken 10 times on Voice of America, the official U.S. broadcast into China, Taiwan, and Hong Kong. In 2009, she published a book called Human Rights in China After the Olympic Games. Our third panelist in green, Dr. Carissa Cloward, earned her PhD in political science at Yale and joined the faculty at SMU shortly afterward. Her research took her to Kenya, where she studied international efforts to end female genital mutilation and child marriage among the Maasai and Samburu peoples. Dr. Cloward found that the communities most likely to change these practices were ethnically diverse communities that had had some prior contact with other tribes and other customs. She also found that educational efforts were best directed at village elders and leaders. If they could be persuaded that change was desirable, then educational efforts directed at girls were likely to succeed. Dr. Cloward now studies the structure and practices of non-governmental organizations, identifying those that are most likely to be effective in the long run. Dr. Halpern, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Beverly, and thank you all for coming. I think you were quite right up front. It's a pretty grim topic, to say the least. This is a distinguished panel, so I'll ask each of you the same question just for starters. What did you think of the film? Now, obviously, Reggie, you're in the film a lot. That may be a tainted question to you more than the others, but what did you think? What did each of you think of the film from your own area of expertise and regional area of the world? Because you each have experience in or background from a different part of the world, and you and I will share this now.
You want me to start?
Fine.
Thank you for inviting us, and thank you for putting this documentary and drawing attention to this horrific, definitely, problem. I'm really sad in this day and age that societies seek this kind of treatment for women. I'm sure many people think that, I'm not going to talk as Texas Muslim Women Foundation, I'm talking as a Muslim. It's very sad. I wrote many of the statements that were written there, that girls are thieves or girls are a burden, and just strikes me that for us Muslims, if we understand what the faith teaches, this is almost blasphemy, because God was very clear in His holy book that He created man and woman from a single soul, so they are equal. They are equal in rights, they are equal in responsibilities, but they have different roles to play. And for somebody from God's creation to take upon themselves the decision to change that or to devalue the other simply because of their gender, as far as I am concerned, this is blasphemy. Now, definitely, it's due to cultural underpinnings, and as you have mentioned, it will require education. You have to educate, and you have to educate early on. And the patriarchal societies that value men over women have to take a stand. For us, we are lucky here in the Metroplex that this is how we saw it right from the very beginning. We reached to the scholars in the faith. We asked their help in addressing domestic violence, one form of unfair and unjust treatment to women, and we asked them to educate the community. And they have come through for us, and they are putting their hands with our hands to educate about this. I think this is what we need to do as a community, both locally, nationally, and internationally, to educate, and this will be the solution for the problem. But it is horrific. In China, 37 million men. This is horrific. Thank you.
Can we ask questions?
Sue. Just come down.
Well, I guess maybe I should respond. You said, what did I think of the film? Basically, I didn't have anything to do with the making of this film. I want to say, I was an expert, just interviewed from the safety of the United States on this film. But the true heroes in this film are the women who were willing to be interviewed, especially the women from China, because everything that was in this film, everything I said, everything the other experts said, and everything that the women said would be considered to be state secrets in China. And you talk about forced abortion. China officially denies that forced abortion even happens. So these women were really taking their safety into their hands by appearing in this film. And so, my hope is that the word is really going to go out, and I am delighted. I don't know if you even know this, but this film has been accepted as an official selection in the Amnesty International Film Festival in Toronto. So I'm very grateful to Amnesty International for that, and anyone else who just gets the word out about this tremendous atrocity against women.
So I think I'm coming from maybe a slightly different perspective because I study women's human rights in an academic context. And while I focus on different aspects of women's human rights, so I'm focused on female genital mutilation and early marriage, and I'm working in a different region of the world, so East Africa rather than Asia, I still see a lot of parallels between what is demonstrated in the film and what I encounter in my own work. So, for example, thinking about the causes of these kinds of practices, what we see is sort of this mix between cultural and economic sources. It's not purely culture. It's not just, we can't just chalk it straight up to patriarchy, but there are sort of complex factors underlying these kinds of practices. So I see that parallel sort of extending across different kinds of issues. And also sort of the challenges in terms of trying to address these kinds of issues through a legal approach. That when laws are sort of effective when the vast majority of the population already embraces the norms underlying those laws. And if people don't really believe that the law is reasonable, and if they don't really believe that the law is prohibiting something that is in fact a bad thing, then enforcement is likely to be very minimal. And so if you're looking to sort of change something long term, it may be well and good to focus on outlawing these kinds of practices, but that's probably not going to have the kind of dramatic effect that people are hoping for. And something that's likely to be more successful is something like education, for girls and better access to healthcare and simply, improved economic conditions for women. Although that's likely to take much longer and be a less direct route than people might hope would happen through something like outlawing these practices.
And we will come to you for your questions in a moment.